Everybody, we're going to get started. I know the food's arriving, but we're going to get going, so we're not here till all hours. Thank you everyone for coming. I think this is probably our best turnout we've probably had in a year or more, somewhere like that. We got a full house. For those who don't know me, I'm Kevin Waltman. Essentially now I'm your regional director, if you haven't met me before. We're going to have a great presentation tonight, and thank you, Joe, for coming and doing this presentation for us. And I'll hand it over to John to do formal introductions.
Thanks very much for coming. This is, I think, maybe a record turnout for all time, recent times. Now, I know Bill Frederick, if he was here, he'd say, "Oh, John, we used to have 400 people coming to this meeting, you know?" Oh, and one of our speakers was Jesus Christ himself. Also, but anyway, this, I think, for modern times is a really record turnout, and hope that everybody has come out. I shouldn't have said all that because it's going to Joe's head, but we really are privileged tonight to have a really special program. I think everybody in this room has probably had some interaction or is aware of Joe Bortz, but I will, as I'm obligated to do, give my little introduction here. Joe's a Chicago native. He was an early car enthusiast and started out with, you know, a Corvette and a old Chevy and the kind of things that people could afford back then, but eventually got involved in classic cars. Then he morphed into concept cars and has become, I think, what would be legitimately described as one of the experts in antique and classic car marketing nationally. You see his ads in Hemmings and in various magazines, and he's also very well respected as probably the country, if not the world's, authority on concept cars because of what he's had and what he still has. And just as recently, as he'll say in a minute, he's gotten some notoriety with a car that he had out in Pebble Beach 3 weeks ago or so. So it's really been a great life in the hobby, and it's not over yet. It's still going strong. So I'd like to introduce Joe Bortz. Joe, thanks very much for being here, and I'm sorry I'm coming in the middle of your dinner here.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody, and what I'm going to present is something I never composed before. It's what I call my ancient history. You know, I'm always concerned with my current things that I'm doing, like we just had the car out at Pebble Beach, and it was very successful. We got a very successful award there. It was presented by Sandra Button, who's the chairman. And then she came out to present our award. And it was the fourth time that we had been part of the stars of the show at Pebble Beach, 89, 90, 2008, and then this year. So that was very nice. But that's the current situation. And I wanted to do something a little different, so we decided to do ancient history. Ancient history is kind of my story of how I got started being interested in cars. So this is going to be helter-skelter. It's not really organized, and, you know, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip. That kind of goes back to the beginning. I'm probably about 14 or 15 there. And my dad knew that I was always very interested in cars. He was not a car guy. And up in Evanston, Humphrey Chevrolet, they had a guy there that was wealthy, and he bought a 53 Corvette. And when the 54s came out, he traded in, got a 54. And when the 55s came out, he traded in his 54. When the 56s came out, he traded in his 55. And my dad was very friendly with the manager up there. And I guess he was doing pretty well in his business at the time. And he said, hang around the house here. We lived up on North Ashland Avenue in Chicago. He said, I'm going to go up there. I'm buying that 55 Corvette. I'll be driving it back down here in a couple hours. So I sat out in front of the house, and a few hours later, my dad pulls up in the Corvette, tosses me the keys, and I was 14 or 15, and I was a good driver. And he said, take it around the block. So I got in the car and I drove down Ashland Avenue, a couple of blocks, made a left turn coming down the side street. There was a car coming at me. And didn't want to scratch on the driver's side with the car coming at me. So I pulled over nice and tight to the cars that were parked there on the street. What I didn't see, there was like a 51 Plymouth. And you know how they had those big chrome bumpers that would wrap around the front and then they come around the side. Well, this guy must have got the bumper caught on a tree and the bumper was sticking right into the traffic. So as I'm tightening up, it catches the Corvette right behind the front wheel and removes the right side of the car from the front wheel all the way to the tip of the tail light like a can of sardines. And I didn't have a driver's license and I didn't know what to do. I looked back, I saw all the fiberglass on this guy's bumper. I continued on, got down onto Ashland Avenue. My dad was standing out in front of the house, very proud that, of his new Corvette and me driving it. But that was on the driver's side. When I made the U-turn and came around the other way, you could see there was no car there. He was so taken back, he really didn't get mad. He was like out of breath. And it took, oh, we got a train here. It took a guy from General Motors to come down and fix it. And this is not this part of this story. And they got it fixed. But eventually my dad, in 1960, bought me a brand new 60 Corvette. We're going to jump to another story here. And I took it out to California. And I was kind of hot rodding it through a turn and drove it up onto a guardrail. And the car was about another 3 feet forward. This is when it was a straight drop down into the ocean. Had I been going 5 miles an hour faster, I would not be here telling you the story. And so I've had some Corvette stories. That Corvette got fixed up, and I was going to Roosevelt University down on Michigan Avenue, parking in Grant Park. And I used to take the L train down sometimes, and sometimes I drive the Corvette. So one day I was after the school, and I went to go get my Corvette, and I wasn't in the parking. I said, "Oh, I took the L today." And I go when I get on the L, and I'm driving back, I'm going north, and wait a second. I drove down today. Some guy cut me off and gave me the finger or something. I definitely drove down today. I went back and the car wasn't there. It was stolen. And the insurance company paid for the car. And I went out and I don't remember what I got for my next car, but about 6 months later, the car was registered to me. The police called me and said, "Hey, you have a Corvette?" And I said, "Well, I used to." Well, they said, "Well, we have it in the pond. Do you want to come and see it?" I said, "Yeah." And this is what I saw. The thieves burnt it. And it looked like white hay on the chassis because the fiberglass resin was burnt out of the fiberglass and the fiberglass itself was white. So now, going back to more of the beginning of time, really my first collector car was a 1928 Chevy padded top Landau coupe. And I think I found that in the Tribune in 1960 or 61. And we took my dad's 61 Corvair four-door sedan, me and Al Gertzman. We went out to pick it up, and it was in some western suburb about 40 miles west. And we took a rope that was about 40 feet long or 30 feet long and tied it to the rear bumper of the Corvair, tied it to the front bumper of the Chevy, and pulled it about 50 miles an hour all the way home on the highway. And of course, today you do that, you'd spend at least one night in the pokey. You couldn't get away with that today. But back then you got away with a lot. Now, my first Packard was a 1929, I believe. It could have been a 30. Standard 8 four-door sedan. And that's my dog, Rip Von Torn. And he loved being chauffeured in the car. That was his favorite place to be. And I used to drive all over. And then my next classic after that, got it out of White Plains, New York, was a 1931 Cadillac V8 convertible coupe. What's interesting about that car, you'll notice here it has black wall tires because the only tires you could get for a classic car back then were truck tires, and they didn't come in white walls. So if you wanted white wall tires, you used to paint them on the car, paint them on the wheel. But when you painted them on the wheel, what would happen is the rubber would start to bleed through the white paint and would turn it brown. So every time you washed the car, you had to paint your tires too. So there, see those white walls? That's painted tires. But it was a great car and I really enjoyed it. And it was a good looking car. It was a good looking car. So I don't know what's coming up next. Oh, yeah. So now, back then, Hemmings had come out, and I have a good Hemmings story I'll tell you about. But Hemmings had come out as a little tiny magazine, no pictures, nothing like that. And what you would do is somebody had a car somewhere else in some other state, you'd call them on the phone and say, well, send me some Polaroid pictures of your car. And they'd send one or two pictures, and I would write on the back their information. And, you know, most of them I wasn't buying because I was shopping around, but I saved those pictures. These pictures are from I don't know, it was early 60s. And now there should be on the back of some of these pictures, is there a price on that one? $1,600. And I thought it was highway robbery. Yeah, $1,600. So there's another one, Packard. And back then, you know, prices were pretty reasonable. I remember once there was an ad in the Chicago Tribune, and in the early 60s, guys were collecting Model A's and Model T's. And I remember one guy said, well, you can't collect those Cadillacs. They got Bakelite steering wheels. You can't, it's not like a nice wooden steering wheel on a Model A or a Model T. You have to, you know, you can't restore a Bakelite steering wheel, so don't ever buy one of those plastic cars. No, but I did. Yeah, this guy was out of his mind, $3,000 for that car. I mean, he was, you know, I don't know what was wrong with him, but there's his phone number. You can give him a call, see if he still got it. So, and I can't see what the year of the license plate is on that one, but this is kind of interesting. Like I say, ancient history, 50 years ago, half a century or more. That's a 32, probably standard 8, as I would guess it. Yep, look at that, 902, yeah. 32, 902, and 201, that's probably New Jersey. Yep, that's New Jersey. Okay, is there another one now? Okay, let's see which car this is. $1,000. Oh, highway robbery for sure. $1,000 for that car. I mean, he's crazy, crazy. And here's one for, is there no price on it? No, that was the same car. And it's Illinois too. Oh, now here's a great story. There's a great story. There was a guy named L. Morgan Yost. L. Morgan Yost was an architect, and he collected Packard. He had all kinds of Packards, but the best car was a 33 Packard V-windshield Dietrich Phaeton. Take a look at that car. That was fabulous. And now this is probably 1961. I was probably 20 years old. I was so impressed with L. Morgan Yost. For a while, I changed my letterheads on my letters. Remember, you used to have stationery back then, you know, stationery. I changed it from Joseph Bortz. I changed my name to J. Elliott Bortz because that was my middle name and that was his middle name. And I thought that was so cool because he was so cool. So for about 5 years, I was being called J. Elliott Bortz. And then I, of course, went back to my Joseph Bortz, Joe Bortz. And that's L. Morgan Yost right there. And he was a character. He was a character. And that's a car that eventually took the best of show at Pebble Beach. But that car, the car when it took best of Pebble Beach was maybe 15 years ago. And that picture is probably from 1960 or 70. And the reason I didn't buy it is I thought it was a custom car, customized by, customizers in California, like George Barris. And turned out it was a very special car. V windshield too. V windshield is always special. And you can see from the headlights, it's what, a 33, I think. So it's ancient history, ancient history. And I don't know what we got now. Great story, great story. That's a picture of this car in front of my house. And I don't live in that house anymore. I lived in that. That was the Fannie Simmons mattress house. I bought that in 78 and lived there till just after the turn of the century. It was a great house for taking pictures in front of. And this is a story. There was a kid named Erwin Garber back in the 60s. Erwin had this thing for finding great cars in alley garages. He would go down alleys and peek in windows. I like to spend the whole day doing that. And every once in a while, he'd find a car. So one day he calls me up and he says, Joe, I found a 1932 Cadillac V8 dual cowl Phaeton in this garage. It's up on blocks. And he takes me over there, and sure enough, fabulous car. The right front fender was bent over, touching the right front wheel. So it was in a garage in front of a 2 or 3 flat building. I went over there and knocked on one of the doors, and turned out it was the woman that owned the building and owned the garage. I said, I'd like to find out who owns the car. She says, why? And I said, well, I'd like to buy it. She says, I'm not going to tell you who owns it. I said, why is that? She said, because he pays his rent every month and I don't want to see it get sold. I won't get the rent. And the rent was either $7 or $10 a month, I think it was $7. And she wouldn't tell me. Eventually, somehow or other, I found out the guy who owned it. His name was Larry. And his father was kind of a politician with the mayor of Chicago. And the story was when Larry graduated college in 1932, his father brought him a brand new 1932 Cadillac V8 dual cowl Phaeton. And he was in a parade for the mayor one year when he won his re-election in the 1950s, and he ran into a police car in front of him in the parade, bent the right front fender, had to have the car towed to a garage in the alley, and it's been in this garage since 1952. Never moved it since. So I told Larry, I want to buy the car. And no, I won't sell it. And eventually I'd call him, back then, you'd get persistent. I'd call him a couple times a year. Eventually he says, Joe, you're on my list. I said, okay. And eventually, as the years went by, I got out of the classic cars and got into cars of the 50s, special cars like 53 Eldorados, 53 Buick Wildcats, and things like that. And, and now it's about 1998. One morning I get a call. Is this Joe Bortz? I said, yeah, it is. Okay, I'm ready. I said, well, excuse me, who is this? It's Larry. I said, oh, Larry who? Larry with the Cadillac. I said, I'm not looking at a Cadillac. I don't know who you are. He said, what do you mean? He says, every morning I get up, am I going to sell Joe Bortz the Cadillac? Every morning I say no. This morning I got up, I said yes. I said, well, I really don't know who you are. And he said, well, he started explaining the car. I said, oh, I remember that car. You still got that car? He says, of course. He says, I said, I'm going to sell it to you now. I said, well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really into classic cars at this moment. He said, where is the car? He says, it's in the same garage in Chicago, West Rogers Park in an alley. I said, well, Larry, I'll come over and look at it. And it was November. And so he tells me where it is. I go over there and waiting in the alley, and it was kind of cold that day. And he pulls up in a car in front of my car, and he gets out and he turns off the car, and I see a woman sitting in the car. And I said, the woman, who's that? He said, that's my wife. I said, well, don't you want to leave the car running? It's kind of cold. It was like maybe 15 degrees out. He says, she'll be all right. Don't worry about it. So, okay. So we go get into the garage. He puts the key in the side door. Oh, I brought the wrong keys. I said, well, I'll wait here, Larry, and you go home and get the right keys. No, we'll do this next Sunday. All right, now I'm getting kind of interested. And so the following Sunday he comes. He's got a key, the door opens up. I said, Larry, turn on the lights. He said, there's no electricity out here. I said, okay, well, let's open up the overhead door to get some light in here. Well, no, we can't do that. It's nailed shut. I don't want anybody stealing the car. I said, Larry, let me go get a flashlight. So I go in my car. I have a flashlight in there for 2 years and never use it. So like, it's a little flashlight, and I'm looking at this car with this like beam that's about this big. And I'm going over it, I'm going, this thing is really neat, And I said, Larry, let's get together next Sunday and I'll bring my mechanic and we're going to take a good look at this car. So mechanic, we came out with a crowbar, we got the garage door open, and I realized this is one hell of a car. So I made a deal with him and I bought it, and we took the car home, and I was in Highland Park in my big house at the time, and had a 4-car garage. We put it in there and we opened it up and put penetrating oil in every cylinder, and we left it like that for a week. And we got a battery, and it turned over without the plugs in it, so there was no compression. We put the plugs in, put some gas directly to the gas can, I think, on the wall, or whatever it was. And it turned over about 10 or 12 times and started right up. I mean, it was unbelievable. It hadn't run in 30 years or whatever it was. And we got the right front fender fixed, and we put some upholstery material over the seats, over the leather that was pretty rotten, and that's how it looked. And my dog there, that's Spuds. He loved being chauffeured around in it, just like Britt Von Torn did long before him. And that was the coach house for the house. But it didn't come with the house. They had divided the property up. So I had to build a 4-car garage on the house to match the design of the house. And I had that car for a while, and I don't remember why I sold it, but I sure shouldn't have. So now, this is a picture in 1962 or 63. That particular Packard was a seven-passenger standard 8 limousine. And I bought that car especially because I got married in 64, and I was going to use it for the wedding. As it turned out, I hardly used it at all, but I had it all restored for that purpose. And that was a very nice Packard. But, there's nothing better than a Packard looking over the hood of a Packard. The design of that hood is better than any other hood to look at. That way it's kind of carved out like that. So now, here's a story here. There was a guy named Jim DeBiccaro. I don't know, does anybody know Jim DeBiccaro? Jim DeBiccaro was a car dealer and a real character. And in 1964, I bought my 1933 Auburn 12-cylinder Salon Speedster basket case from Jim DeBiccaro. And he was a very aggressive guy. And he considered himself the premier guy of finding cars. And everybody knew about this car. This is the 1935 Robert Hall McCormick V12 dual cowl Phaeton. And somebody told me about it, and they said, yeah, the guy's in Oak Park and nobody can buy it from him. He just won't sell it to anybody. So somebody gave me the address. Now, this is a picture of him in Oak Park, the owner, in front of his house. And I said, somebody finally gave me the name and the phone number of the guy, and I went over there, and I didn't have the phone number. He gave me the name and address. And I went over and knocked on the door. And the guy answered the door, and I said, you know, and I was probably at that point, I don't know, 21, 22, pretty young. At least it seems like it now. Yeah. And I told him I was there, and I just heard he had the car and everything. He said, oh, nice young college guy, come on, I'll show you my car. And he showed me his car. It was covered up with bed sheets. I don't know if we have that picture or not. And he says, you know, I said I'd never sell this car, but I don't know. I guess one day I'm going to have to sell it. You look like a guy. And I think the price was $18,000. That was a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I don't remember where I got the money from, but I got it. And I went and I bought it. And I don't know if you can see the date. There's another picture, maybe that shows the date on it. 1969. They had a building. It wasn't McCormick Place. It was the one that burnt down, I think, before McCormick Place. They had a car show there. And I just took the car there, just not thinking much about it. And I won the trophy in 1969. So, and by the way, J. Elliott Bortz. J. Elliott Bortz. So, and eventually I sold the car. I sold the car to get my Duesenberg. I sold the Hinz-Peter car, which we haven't seen. And I sold that car. And when I sold them, I got $35,000, and I bought my Duesenberg for $35,000. That's the car that it ended up with some guy. He painted it dark blue, and I think he just killed the car with the color. And that's a model, of course. That's a model that some company made of it. So now there's the Hinz-Peter car. Mr. Hinz-Peter lived in Lake Forest. He lived on Green Bay Road in Lake Forest on the west side of the road. And it was the last driveway on Green Bay Road before it went into the next suburb. And somebody told me about him, and his driveway to his little mansion was probably, at least a quarter of a mile. And that car, it's just so lovely, and the colors are so great. That's the car that when he got married, he bought in 1931. And him and his wife went on their honeymoon in that car. And I don't remember how I found out about it, but I went there, and eventually he said he'd sell it to me, and he did. And I would have never sold it, but I always wanted a Duesenberg. So I sold that car and the Robert Hall McCormick car, and I had the money for the Duesenberg. And if I had to do it again, I think I'd just keep the two Packards. So now that Packard, that's Minnesota Fats, and he was writing a book. And they wanted to have, it was called The Great Bank Shot, the book. And they heard that I had a classic Packard. They wanted to have a picture of him like he had just done a bank job, with money on the ground and a shoulder hold, and that's me next to him. And that's them taking the picture in an alley in a garage in an alley that had this beautiful old weathered building in it. And they were shooting that picture for the opening picture in the book. That's me on the left there. And that's Lou Nathan-Schoen's house right there. That's my 37 Cord. And that's an interesting story. Yeah. John, how are we doing with time here?
You have 25 minutes left.
Oh, okay, good, okay. So I'm gonna tell you a story about that car. But that's Lou Nathan-Schoen, who lived directly across the street from my house that belonged to Fanny Simmons. And that's a picture of my court in front of Lou's house. Now, there's a great story about that car. And I think the title was, I slept on a wooden bench to get my 37 quart supercharged sportsman. And what happened was, the guy had a 37 quart supercharged sportsman. And he was out in the state of Washington, maybe. And this is in 1966, 67. And I decided to fly out to buy it, and the price was $3,500. But I only wanted to spend $3,000. So I flew out there. And he picked me up at the airport and said, we can go over the garage, but do you mind if I take you over and show you some of my banjos? Now, that'll take me back to another story and tell you why I said yes. But meanwhile, I said, yeah, let's go look at your banjos. So we go over to his house, and he's got banjos hanging on 2 of the 3 walls in his living room. And he had to play each one for me. Each banjo. And I look at my watch, I said, listen, I got a plane that leaves at midnight. We better go look at the car. So we went over, we looked at the car, and I fell in love with it. And I said, we better drive over to the airport. We don't have a lot of time to talk about the negotiation, because I only want to give you 3,000, and he wanted 3,500. So we're in front of the airport, and it was an airport where you literally parked right in front of it. And we argued, and all of a sudden I looked at my watch, I said, it's 10 to midnight, my plane leaves at midnight, I gotta go. And I can't tell you if I paid him 3,000 or 3,500, but I hopped out of that car, ran into the airport, it was 5 to midnight, and had a big glass window, and you could see the plane there. And it pulled out 5 minutes early. And I looked around the airport, and the airport was closed. There wasn't a person in it, and there was a big sign there that says, airport opens at 5:30 in the morning. And he had already left, and they didn't have cell phones. So I looked around, and I said, well, I got some old newspaper, put it on a bench, and went to sleep. I woke up when people started coming into the airport, so I wrote a story. I slept on a wooden bench to get my 37 quart. And these stories are endless. There was a guy named Jim Howe that lived in Lombard, and his specialty was quartz. And the engine was a little not right, so I took it over to Jim. And Jim said, who owned this cord before the guy that had it? I said, no, I don't know. He said, it belonged to Henry. I said, I don't know Henry. He said, well, wait till I tell you his last name. I said, okay, go ahead. He says, his last name is Bortz, and your name is Bortz. I said, that is kind of strange. And eventually, me and Henry Bortz, that's him on the left, became best of friends. And he was the cord expert for the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Club. He was probably about 20 years older than me, passed away a while back, and he's, But anyhow, one of the things is Jim Howe was kind of a strange guy. And one time I went over, oh, by the way, Motor Trend did a story on my cord. That's my cord. And they did a cutaway on it. They did a whole road test on it and everything. Not when I had it, but when Henry Bortz had it. It's a wonderful story about cords and supercharged cords, and my cord in particular. That's my Duesenberg. That's my daughter there when she was a little younger. So she's about going at 48 now or something.
Say something about the house.
Oh, the house. Oh, that's the Fanny Simmons house. Yeah, I had that house. The story on that house is kind of interesting. Everything's interesting. The story on that house is that Henry C. Litt from Litton's department store in downtown Chicago fell in love with a Southern gal, and they wanted to get married. She wanted him to move to the South, and he said, I can't move to the South. I have a very successful department store in downtown Chicago. He said, I'll build you a Southern colonial mansion. So he did that, it was about 1899. He built that in about 1990, in 1900, and it took a couple of years. And then, right before the Depression, Fannie Simmons bought it from him. And it's a marvelous house, yeah.
Stuck to buy it.
Huh?
She used.
Oh, okay, it was an interesting story. When I did buy the house from Fannie Simmons, I had bought it in the wintertime, and she was in Florida, so I actually secured the house with some money. And I couldn't get possession until she came back from Florida in April or May or something. And then I met her at the house, and she was still chuckling about when she bought the house. She said, when I bought the house, I bought it from Henry C. Litton, and rather than paying money, I just signed over stock that was valued at that time for the value of the house. This was 1928 or something. She said by 1929, the house was worth still money, but the stock I gave him was all worthless. So I got the house for nothing. So that was an interesting story. And then while we were talking, she had her grandchildren over there, and one of them came down and said, Grandma, we went upstairs and there's a picture in one of the bedrooms, and when we wanted to take it off the wall and take the picture, it was on a hinge, and behind the hinge there was a safe there. And she said, oh, that safe's been there forever, so there's nothing in it, don't worry about it. And her son went up and looked, and there was a little tag on there that had the combination on it. He opened it up, he came down and said, Grandma, her mom, he said, this is what was in the safe. He said, nothing there. And it was like filled with big diamonds. I mean, and I always thought, if that happened to me, what I questioned myself, was I going to give her back her diamonds or not? I don't know. They were pretty big. Okay, now this is a Packard story. This is a Packard. This is a Packard. It's a Fitzpatrick, right, Debbie?
Yes.
Fitzpatrick. And the story on this car was that I was in Pennsylvania, and I don't know why I was driving through, but all of a sudden, I see this car in a parking lot, like in a shopping center on the road. And I pull over, and I'm looking at it, and it's so gorgeous. And I waited for somebody to come out, but nobody came out to, get in the car, because I was gonna wanna buy it. So eventually I had to leave, and I took the license plate number, and it took me a couple of years to use the license plate number to find out the owner. And I found out the owner, and we became good friends over the phone. He was a judge in Pennsylvania. Huh?
William de Curcio.
Yeah, his name was William de Curcio. And I told him I wanted to buy it. So eventually he said, I'll tell you what, I don't want to sell it, but if you give me a 53 Cadillac Eldorado convertible, I'll trade you even. Okay. So I'm out looking for a 53 Eldorado convertible. And all of a sudden I'm going through Hemmings or something, and I see the cars for sale in an auction. And I'm really upset, I've been looking for this Eldorado for this guy for 2 or 3 months. So I call him up and I said, listen, what's going on? I see you put the car into an auction at Atlantic City Auction. And he said, well, I decided that my friend needed a good car for his auction, so I gave it to him. And well, that's not very nice. And I was kind of ticked off. Debbie said to me, so are we going to go to the auction? I said, absolutely not. I'm just really upset. The night before the auction, I said to Debbie, I said, call the airlines. I think we're going to the auction. And so we got some tickets lined up, we had some tickets, that's the guy that built the car, that's Phil Lacey. And that's the whole story, that's him, that was him as a young man, that's him when I had the car, he came to see it. And, where did I leave off, Debbie?
We went to New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, so we flew the following morning. We had plane, we took a cab out to O'Hare. And we hopped on the plane, and when I got off the plane, I thought that, Atlantic City, I thought the airport was right there. The auction was right there with the airport, no, it was like 30 miles away or something. And I looked at my wallet and I got like $100, $103 in my wallet. This was all impromptu. So I was a cab there and I said, how much would it cost to get to this auction? It's it's about a little over $100. I said, can you do it for 100? He said, yeah, I can do it for 100. I said, no tip. So he said, okay, so he takes us there. And we get there. And we walk into the auction and Debbie goes, God damn it, I'm
I
scared.
didn't say that.
Oh, no, Debbie never swears. Oh, not, Debbie never swears like she's in a bar or something. Like, oh my God, no, she says, oh my God, I am very hungry. And I looked at my wallet, I had $3, I said, here, $3, go knock yourself out. And, go easy, you're way ahead of me here. So, okay, we'll finish it.
John, the guy that ran the auction.
Yeah, John, the guy who ran the auction, knew me, and he came up and greeted me, and I said, John, I said, I told Debbie, I don't have any money for food, he said, here's $100, don't worry about it, So we were there, and the car that I was gonna get to trade for this car at that time was about $100,000. And, this car went for auction, and at that time, it was about double that, and I bought it. And I'm glad I did, and I still have it. But after I got it, I had it for a few years, and I get a call on the phone, do you know where the Fitzpatrick car is? I said, well, who are you, and why do you wanna know? So, well, my father is the one who built the car, and there's a whole story about how his father had a Packard, 41 Packard, and he met a guy named Fitzpatrick in California who had a bodybuilding shop. And Bill Lacey was always making drawings. And he showed the drawings to Fitzpatrick, and they said, we're gonna build that car on your 41 chassis, and that's how the car got built. And Bill Lacey was a trainer for pilots. And I think it was he was called back into the Air Force to do some training for some reason, right before the car was finished. And when he came back and got out, Mr. Fitzpatrick went out of business with his shop and sold the car. So he never saw the car finished. He saw it almost finished. And so his son was calling me trying to find out about the car because he heard about the car. And it turned out that I thought this was a great story, and they did a TV story about the whole thing. And Dream Car Garage up in Canada, we sent the car up there, and we went up there, and he came in there with his family, and he saw the car after 30, 40 years, and he's crying, and the family's crying, and it was a whole TV show. If you put on Joe Bortz Fitzpatrick, you could see it's on YouTube. And, okay, so quickly on this story. 10 minutes. This is the story about the honesty, the great honesty of all car collectors. There was a guy named Homer Fitterling. Homer Fitterling had about 10 Duesenbergs, and he kept them in the museum at the Auburn Court Duesenberg Museum. And one day I met Homer Fitterling, and he says, you gotta come down and see the cars that I got down at my house. And he had all kinds of Corvettes and just an assortment of interesting cars, but he had this Packard Panther. And I said, you know, the Packard Panther's a concept car, and at that moment in time, it was probably in the middle '80s, I started collecting concept cars. And I said, I'd really like to buy this car. And we made a deal at the time, didn't make a deal. He said, Joe, when I sell the car, you're gonna get it, this is the price. I said, that's good car, so. And about 8 years later, Homer Finley, I heard, sold all his cars, his Duesenbergs and all the cars that were at his house. I called him up, hey, Homer, I heard you sold all your cars. Yeah, I did, Joe. I said, did the Packard Panther go with the whole collection? He said, yes, it did. I said, oh, okay, I just was curious. I said, why? He said, well, you remember you said you were gonna sell it to me, but that's okay. I mean, it was years ago. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And he sold it to a guy who had a big rug manufacturing company, very wealthy guy. He says, no, I gotta do something about this, Joe. I said, no, don't worry about it, Homer. He said, and then we just ended the conversation like that. And about 3 weeks later, he said, Joe, the Panther's in my garage, you come pick it up. And I think the price was $50,000. And I said, oh, okay. He says, you know, Joe, it was really funny when I went back to the guy who bought all those cars, the Duesenbergs, 10 Duesenbergs. He tried to like stick me a little. And he said, you know, the only reason we bought all those Duesenbergs and all those other cars was just to get the Packard Panther. Anyway, because he wanted to get as much money back on the Packard Panther because he was going to give it back to Homer Fuller. He really didn't want it. So I got the Packard Panther and I had it for a long time. And eventually I had a triple bypass in 2008. And I thought, well, this is kind of like the end of the story for me. And I started selling off some cars, and that was one I sold off. This is a picture for the very first time at Pebble Beach. They used my cars to put concept cars on the back lawn. There's the Packard Panther, there's the Diablo, there's the Chrysler, what can I? The fire arrow, yeah, fire arrow, they made, yeah. And then I think my Hudson is over there, yeah. So that was the first time. Now they have concept cars on the back lawn every year, but I was the one that broke through the glass ceiling for that to happen. So there's a Packard that I was offered to buy. Somebody tried to sell it to me and it looked kind of special. I never bought it, but I kept the picture, so it might be somewhere. I don't know how special it is. There's a license plate too. So
Joe, was that up in Wisconsin?
I don't know. I mean, you're talking 40 years ago or something. I don't remember. So, yeah. So, and then I had 5 of those 5 of the Future line of buses. Yeah, I had 5 of those. And
Debbie's Barn Find.
Debbie's Barn Find. Okay, so Debbie has her own cars. The one thing she makes sure of is that if she has a car, she's gonna take care of it, she's gonna set up the restoration, whatever it is, because she doesn't want somebody to say, you know, a lot of guys have cars, you know, that's my wife's car, just to, you know, mention it that way, but Debbie really has her own cars. Right now she has a 64 XKE Roadster. And, but this was a car that Debbie found, and she bought it. And it's it's got a, what's the name of the company that made the train cars? Pullman. Yeah, Pullman. I think it's a Pullman body. And it's a really gorgeous body because it's short coupled and it looked like, remember I had that Cadillac that started up after 30 years. So we thought that was gonna start up. Debbie thought it was gonna start up. And the engine was frozen, they couldn't unfreeze it. They did everything, they pulled it with a chain on the road and then popped the clutch out, wouldn't break loose the engine. And Debbie said, I'm not gonna mess with it. She took it to Hershey and sold it. And somebody restored it and it looked pretty damn good. But it's really a great car, great car. So we gotta hit,
Peterson Museum.
oh, So, okay, so eventually I got into collecting concept cars. And eventually I specialized in Harley Earl Motorama cars. I had a lot of Chrysler cars, but I couldn't really have that many cars and take good care of them. So I skimmed it down to General Motors Motorama cars, and currently at the Peterson Museum, which is probably the best museum in the world. They spent $43 million just to remodel the building to make it a museum from an old department store. And these are two of my cars. That's the Buick Wildcat 1 2-passenger fiberglass show car. That's the '53 Pontiac Parisian. That's that show car in '53. And then, is there another picture there, John? There. Now, that's the two cars again there. That's the Wildcat again. Okay, and then over there you see the LaSalle, that the greatest, some people say that's the Wildcat at Pebble Beach with the top of it. And some people say that the best car find, junkyard car find, was the Great War Whoop car find in 1985 with 4 Motorama cars that I ended up buying there. Go back one, John. Let's see. No, go forward, forward, forward. Again, forward. Okay, that's the Bonneville Special. That is the most original Motorama car that exists today. The paint, the chrome, everything on that car, the tires, the air in the tires. It's a 1954 Pontiac Bonneville Special. I believe that at least 50% of the air in the tires is 1954. And then to the right, the Biscayne came out of the War Hoops junkyard. There might be a picture of it coming up. I don't know, in the War Hoops junkyard. You don't have that, huh, John? No? No, okay. And then there's the two LaSalles. That LaSalle on the right is junkyard fresh, and that was the best car of the, in condition. The other cars next to it is the LaSalle Roadster, and that one was, and they both have V6 aluminum block, double overhead cam engines, with independent rear suspension in 1955. And you'll notice that the groove on the side was what was on the '56 Corvette. And the LaSalle Roadster was going to be the '57 design for the '57 Corvette, but they just used the '56 design to make the '57 design. They never used that design. So those are two Motorama cars. Both of them came out of the War Hoops junkyard. And they're currently at Peterson Museum until, it's a 2-year show. And if they're there for 2 years until April of 2026. And from there, they're going to Gilmore Museum for at least 1 year. So I think that's it, right? That's it. There's the Falcon, that's the car. That's the Falcon at Pebble Beach in 1990. And that's the car that went back to Pebble Beach this year and took the Virgil Exner Award, which I consider the top award. The other two cars I used to own, but they're Exner cars, I don't own those anymore. And that's the car with the Falcon with the top up. Great looking car. Look at the bumpers in the taillight, you know, outside exhaust. And the convertible top, instead of kind of coming straight down the back, he sloped it kind of airflow style. Great design. And then they made a model of it. That's me holding the model and the front end of the car. By the way, when they came out with the Chrysler 300 4-door sedan, noticed the grille, copied that grille almost identically on the Chrysler 300s that came out recently.
Explain what the car was supposed to do. What was Chrysler, why Chrysler built it?
Oh, well, you know, in '53, Virgil Exner came out with the Corvette. And then in '55, Ford came out with the Thunderbird 2-seater. Oh, yeah, I said General Motors came out with the Corvette, General Motors. And Ford came out with the '55 Thunderbird first time. And this was the '55 Chrysler Falcon, and that was supposed to go into production, but it never did. And it would have really, it had a Hemi engine, 300 horsepower. I mean, it would have put Chevrolet, Corvette, and Thunderbird right out of business. But they didn't produce it, so they made two. And this is the only one that's known. The other one hasn't been found, so if you do find it, please call me. I know why.
We're trying to play a video here, but we haven't really been successful at it when we tested it. But there was a video that Debbie made of it at
Pebble Beach.
Pebble Beach.
There's a Pebble Beach. That's Sandra Kasky in the red dress coming out. She's the chairman of Pebble Beach. And it's the only car she delivered the trophy personally to. I wasn't there because I can't stand up for 12 hours and not sit down. So I sent my car handler out there. And that's him driving it over the stand there to take the trophy.
Go ahead and go to detail.
And,
I think we have it, yeah.
okay, there you go. It looks like it. Okay, that's the overhead. And it's coming down, you can see. Now that's the Falcon driving up to the grandstand. Is got volume with that? Yeah.
Let me have your microphone, see if we can get the sound out.
That's really a good looking car.
By entrant Joe Bortz, who though unable to be with us today, made sure that this really important car was present. Now the Falcon was an idea car. It was crafted by Exeter to rival the Corvette and the Thunderbird. There were only two of them created by Gear, and only this one remains. It rides on a shortened Chrysler chassis and features Exeter's signature details: the futuristic tail lights, the integrated bumpers, side pipes, and a 300 horsepower Hemi under the hood. Now, Joe is one of the really great stewards of automotive history, and he's probably preserved more concept cars that were once destined for the scrapyard than anyone else. So, the chairman of the Pebble Beach Concours, Sandra Button, is walking down towards us now, and she's going to be presenting the Spirit of Virgil Exeter trophy to Joe. It's both a tribute to Exeter's legacy, but also to Joe's dedication to really preserving automotive history. So some lovely photographs being taken. For Joe to understand the day. Thank you, Sandra. That was lovely. Very well done, Sandra. You should be handed over. So thank you very much. A big round of applause to Joe. Now let's continue with
Joe Bortz was extremely honored to receive the prestigious Spirit of Virgil Exner Trophy at the Pebble Beach Concours. Delegates for his 1955 Chrysler Ghia Falcon that was designed by Virgil Exner.
So, I think that a lot of the credit here for what just happened has to go to John. And I've been in a lot of clubs, over the years, and I've been in a lot of the committees for clubs, and you are so fortunate to have John. You have no idea. He is the glue and the inspiration and everything. I think that really makes things work so well for this club, and it really is a great club. And I think John deserves a lot of the credit here, and just putting this whole video together, this sequence. I mean, whatever John does, it's always very professional. So I want to thank John, and I know you guys always do thank John, and he's really just one great guy for being a great guy, but also for the club itself. So it's been a real joy to do this, and it's been a pleasure to have John help out to make it look all so professional. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. And meeting is adjourned. Appreciate everybody coming again. Again, I think this is a record turnout, and I would just urge you to put the next meeting, first Monday of November on your, October on your schedule. This is gonna be a really great program on the MG done by David Kerr. And there is no funnier guy, except maybe Bob Joint, no funnier guy in the old car hobby around Chicago than David Kerr. He's, I think, president of the Vintage Sports Car Club now. And he'll be here to talk about the history of Morris Garage and the transition into the MG car company. He has an MG himself, MGTC, and just be a great, another great meeting here. But thanks for coming tonight, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you.